Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today this is episode 9 of my ReactJS beginners course. And in this video, I'm going to be introducing one of the most important topics that you have to learn when you're learning React, which is the topic of state management. More specifically, I'll go over exactly what state management is, what prop drilling is, and also show you guys one of the most common state management solutions in React, which is the built-in context API. So I'm going to show you guys how to use the UseContext hook, how to manage your states in general. And this is really important because it's when we're going to start seeing bits of what React actually is and a little bit of more advanced stuff, which shouldn't be that hard, but I'll try to bottle it down as simple as I can so you guys can learn as much as possible. So with that in mind, let's get into the video. Okay everyone, so like I said, in this video, I'm going to introduce state management in React for you guys. It is one of the most important topics, like I mentioned in the beginning. So I would advise paying full attention because I've made videos on state management, a lot of them actually in the past. You can check them out too. But I would pay attention because this is going to be really important throughout the whole series. So before we start writing any code, I came up with this little example over here where I will explain to you guys what state management is by introducing the main issue that state management solves, which is the idea of prop drilling. There are other reasons to manage your states better other than avoiding prop drilling, which is what I'm going to explain. But this is what really, I believe, gets you to understanding why managing your states correctly is important. So that's why I wanted to present you guys this first. So prop drilling is a concept which is basically the idea of you passing a prop to a component, and that prop won't be used in that component. Its main purpose will be just to be passed down to another component. So this example over here is good in my opinion, because think about it this way. We have what is known as the top component. We have a component that is above all the other two components. And inside of this component, we have a state. When I say it's the top component or above the other components, I just mean that this component it has all of the other two components inside of it, because it calls inside of it the middle component, and the middle component calls the bottom component. So there's other terminologies you can use for this one. For example, you can call this the parent, this the child, and this the grandchild. But I chose top, middle, and bottom because it's more intuitive for some of you. I hope so. I usually call it parent, child, and grandchild, which is more commonly known. But this is just to emphasize the idea that this is calling this, and this is calling the bottom one. So as you can see, we are prop drilling over here, because imagine in a scenario where you have a state that is created in the top component, and it doesn't even have to be a state. It can be a function. It can be anything, any variable that you want to pass down as props. And I'm having to pass it as props to the middle component, although the middle component won't do anything with it other than just pass it down so I can access it in the bottom one. And you can see the bottom one is doing something with the state. Obviously, this is a fake example, but it's doing something with the state. So this is the whole problem with it. Because although we haven't seen any clear situations where this can be an issue yet, so it is important for us to know how to avoid this. And there is a clear way to avoid this, which is by using some sort of state management solution. Now, like the name says, state management is you're just managing your states, preventing it from getting messy, and just having them compactly organized in your project. And I came up with this example over here, which is going to show you guys how to use the context API, which is an API that is a state management solution in React, to actually prevent prop drilling from happening. So I'm going to use the example. I'm going to start out with the project with the same code as before. You can see in the previous episode, I taught you guys the React router DOM library. So we're going to use it just as an example. This is how the code currently looks like. It's just a simple project that has 3 different pages, right? So in order to explain the context API for you guys, I came up with this example using the code from the previous episode. So we're going to be continuing the code that I left off when I taught you guys React router DOM in the previous episode. So we're just going to use this to create another example. If you didn't see the previous episode, this is basically what we built. Just a simple website. It has 3 different pages. There's the home page, the profile page, which is different from the previous episode, but will be important for this one. And there's the contact page. Now, what I want to do in this episode is add a functionality to go to this profile page component, and it will display your username. But I also want to display the username, like some sort of state called username, inside of the home component as well. And on top of that, I want to have a component inside of the profile component, which is going to be used to change that username. Now, that might sound a little bit confusing, but if you understood the whole logic here, we're going to have three different components: the home, the profile, and the component inside of the profile that changes the profile, the username, where all those three components will need to have access to a single state and also be able to change that state. So that's when the context API will be important, and how this is where prop drilling will come into place. So let's start writing that example, right? We have the profile component over here, which right now all it does is it has an h1 tag saying profile. And I also created another component called the change profile component. Imagine in a social media website, you can have something like this, right? Where you have a profile page and you have a section where you can change that, like, information about the profile page. Now, what I want is to display a username, right? So where would I create that username? Well, it's going to be a state, but if I were to create in the profile component, which is the profile page over here, then I wouldn't be able to access it in the home component because it's out of reach, right? The home component and the profile component are siblings of each other, if you see over here. They're next to each other, so I can't pass it through props so that one or the other can get it if I create it inside of the profile. So that means that I need to create that state above the home and the profile components. So where am I going to create it? I'm going to create it right over here in the app component, which is the one level above both of them. So I'm going to create over here right at the top const username. It's just a username for a user, and this is just an example. And then I'm going to say set username, and I'm going to set this equal to use state. Then over here, this is going to be a string. And now that I have this state, we can pass username to the home component as a prop, something like this. And we can also pass it to the profile component, just like this. So now both of them are going to have access to it, right? So we're passing it to the home and we're passing it to the profile. So let's just set it as PedroTech by default so we can see it. I'm going to go to the home component and I'm going to display the username right over here. I don't know, I'm just going to say this is homepage. This is the homepage. And user is, and then I'm going to put the username that we grabbed from the props. So I'm just going to grab props and I'm going to say props.username. Now you see we can display the username in the homepage, right? If you go to the homepage, it'll say this is the homepage and user is PedroTech. Now for the example, we also want to do the exact same thing, but on the profile page. So I'm going to come to the profile page. I'm also going to add over here the props, and I'm going to say profile, whatever, user is, and then I'm going to describe the username. So props.username. So now we have the state that is being used pretty well in both the profile and the home components. But like I mentioned, I want to be able to change this, right? I want to be able to write a new username and change it. But I want to do that inside of the profile component. And I don't want to write all of that logic inside of the single profile component. By the way, I'm going to change this to a div instead of an h1 because this is going to be a big page. So I want to put a component called change profile inside of the profile, and that's going to abstract all of the logic related to changing the profile username or just the username in itself. So we're going to put it right over here, right below where it's displaying the username. And over here is where I want to have a button and an input. So I'm going to put a div, and it's going to have an input where we can write the new username. And there's going to be a button which, when you click on it, it's going to update the username. So change username. And right over here, we're going to have this input where if you write on it, it's going to trigger, right? It's going to get the information of what the new username you want to create is. So we need to create a state that is going to hold which what we're writing on this input, right? We've done this a couple of times. The state will be called new username, and we're going to create a set new username, right? So I'm going to set this equal to use state, and this is going to be a string. So like we've done a bunch of times, we're just going to give this an on change inside of the input, grab the event, then just say that we want to set new username to be equal to event.target.value, right? We've done this a bunch of times, so I really don't need to get really into it. So now we're keeping track of the new username, and we want to be able to, whenever we click on this button, change this username state to be equal to the new username, right? But how would we do that? How would we have access to the set username function? Well, let's think about it this way. We are inside of the change profile. Change profile is inside of the profile, and profile is inside of the app. So we probably need to pass this set username function as props to the profile component, just like this. So now the profile component will have access to it, and it can pass it as props to the change profile component. So I can say props.setUsername. And now in this component, we can just grab props again and use it on the on click of this button, and just say that whenever you click on this button, you want to props.setUsername, just set username like this, to be equal to the new username that we typed inside of the state. So think about it this way. We just passed in the set username function as props to the profile, and then directly, without using it in the profile component, all we did is we just pass it down to the change profile component, so that over here we can actually update the username. And you can see that like the whole logic works. I can change it to become Pedro Technologies instead, or something like this, right? It changes to Pedro Technologies. If I go to the home, it will also be there, Pedro Technologies, and I can change it back to like Ninja or whatever, and you can see like it works. I'm updating the username, but we are prop drilling, which is the whole point of this. We're passing this state down, keep passing it down without actually using it. And you can see it's becoming a mess. It's kind of like we're seeing all this props. It's kind of messy, right? We really don't know the purpose of each of these props, because some of them can just be not have a purpose, right? The set username on this one over here doesn't have a purpose. The only purpose is passing it down. So how would we fix this? So to start that off, let's go to where we create our states, which is on the app component, this one over here. I'm even going to close the other one so it doesn't confuse you guys. So over here, we're creating our states. And this is where we're going to create our store, or where we're going to store all of the states that we want to pass down, right? So the context API allows us to put all of our states, functions, and variables in one place, and then let all the components inside of that place have access to it directly without having to use props. So the way we do this is by, first of all, importing from React the UseContext hook. So this is the third hook we're learning in this course. And this hook over here is going to be, no, that's wrong. So we do this by importing from React the createContext function. And this function over here will allow us to create a context, right? And I'll explain to you guys what a context exactly is. But whenever you want to have groups of components that have access to the same data, which would be like a state or a variable or a function, if you want to have a group of components, it doesn't have to be all your components, you would create what is known as a context for that group of components. You can also create a global context, which is what we're going to do over here. I'll call it app context, like this. And like I said, picture it just like a store or a place where it's going to hold all of the information you want to pass down. So we're going to say create context over here. And now our app context is the context we're going to be using. And to determine which components will have access to that context, we just wrap all of the components that we want to have access to the data as a component, just like this. And we also have to add a dot provider at the end of it, because this means that we're going to be providing data to the components inside of it. So we're going to say dot provider at the end as well. Oh, I accidentally put too much, but yeah. So now that we determined which components will have access to this state, obviously, in our example, only the user, the home and the profile ones needed, but since we're doing it globally over here, I'll just put it so that every other component also have access to it. And when you create a provider, you have to specify which variables and data you want to pass down. In our case, we only have one piece of data, which is the information related to to the username. So we're going to pass over here what is known as the value of this provider, and we'll put the variables and functions and whatever that we want to pass down. So we want to have access to the username and the set username function. So now that we did this, we can actually delete all of the props that we've been passing down. We can delete it because we don't need it anymore. So in order to access the same information as before, we go to the component. For example, the home it had a username prop, right? So if I want to still have the username over here, I can just come to the home. I'll import the UseContext hook, which comes from React as well. And it's the third hook we've learned this course. And with the UseContext hook, I can actually use the app context that I created over here, and I'm exporting it so that we can have access to it in other files as well. I could just import it by saying from /app. We'll go to the app file and grab the app context just like this. And if I use both of this, we can grab the values that are over here directly. So I'm going to grab over here by saying const, setting it equal to UseContext, and I'll just pass which context I want to grab variables from. In our case, it is the app context. And I can just specify inside of this curly braces what information I want to grab back. I can currently just get two things, either the username or the set username. I'll grab the username in this case. So we don't even have to have props in this component because we can just grab that information just like this, and it will still work. I'll do the exact same thing with the profile one because we also need to have access to this information. But you can see we're not using props, but we are getting the information. So I'll say username, and I'll just display the username. For now, I'll just show you guys that this is working, and I'll comment the change profile. But you'll see that it is still working, right? It still says PedroTech on the home one, and it still says PedroTech on the profile one, despite us not using any props. All we're doing is we created a provider that will provide that data to those components inside of it, and we passed in what kind of data we want to provide and use the UseContext hook to grab that data. So it's pretty simple if you really put your mind into it. It's just a very well organized way to handle your states and data. When I say data, I'm not saying state specifically, because you can see we are passing down a function, and that's the important thing, because we still haven't dealt with why this fixes prop drilling. Well, because now in the change profile, we don't have to pass down set username again, right? Like before, we were getting set username as a prop for this just to pass it down. Now I can just grab set username directly in the change profile. I can just come over here, paste the use context and the app context, just copy this as well, and just grab the username. Actually, I don't need the username in this one. What I need is the set username function directly from the context and not using any props. So you'll see it still works as before. I can change this to, I don't know, Pokemon or whatever, and it will change, but we're not grabbing from the props. I can't emphasize this enough because this is really cool. Not that passing props is bad. It's not bad at all. You'll have to pass a lot of props throughout your app. But the thing is, you really only want to pass props when it's necessary, you know? Like it's not, if it's a case like this where you were passing down something without really a necessity, like the profile component didn't need to have the set username function, then you would be better off using the UseContext hook and the context API. So is the context API the perfect solution? Well, for now it's good enough. We will be going over other alternatives to the context API as well. It is built into React, or kinda. It's an API, but it's really recommended by React. You'll find it in the React docs, and It's not a perfect solution, but it is amazing, and I use it still in a lot of projects as well, because I do think there's a lot of good use cases for it. And it's also the best way to introduce state management, because it is the easiest and simplest way to implement a state management solution like this. And yeah, that's basically it. Now, I can't really think of an exercise for the context API. I would just say try to recreate some sort of example like this, where there's 3 components and you were trailing a prop between them, and try to fix it by using the context API. If you have any doubts about this, I'm really passionate about this topic because I don't know why, I just really like all the different state management solutions and making your code look better. So if you have any questions, just leave them down below and I'll answer all of them. Also, I'll link my context API crash course that I released, where I go over all of this and much more. And you can check that out if you're interested. It's a little bit more advanced, but feel free to do so. The code for all of this will be in the description, so just check it out. And yeah, that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.